right, we go now to session 2, a sustainable future for travel and tourism, such an important subject, tourism and sustainability. We were just talking in the break that the way we're seeing the climate changing right now, a summer holiday might be in October or September for those of us in Europe. It's an important subject, and there are many goals for climate and policy in the world. All right, this session is going to be moderated by Cristina Núñez, Managing Director of NECSTouR. That's the voice of European regions for sustainable tourism. Cristina, welcome to you. And our panelist is the Honourable MEP Claudia Monteiro de Aguiar from SME Europe. Welcome to you, Claudia. And we have Peter Gerber, CEO of Brussels Airlines. Welcome to the stage. And Marie-Caroline Laurent, Director General of Europe for Cruise Lines International Association. Welcome to you. And Willie Walsh, Director General of IATA. Welcome to these panelists, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Maria, for giving me the floor, and a big thanks to the organizers of the Global Tourism Forum to be part of this interesting discussion with such distinguished panelists we have today. We could say that we represent a bit the different elements of the different milestones of our customer journey, which needs to be more sustainable. And we are united for a common challenge, and we have been told today that it's not new. We are collectively, our industry is collectively responsible for around 8% of the carbon emissions globally, and we are determined, we have an agenda 2050 where we need to become carbon neutral, passing by 2030 where we are called to, our industry is called to reduce at half the carbon emissions we produce. So this is a challenge we all have. Now, what is going to be the enabler, how we turn this vision into action, and how we can take it as an opportunity for our customers and for our industries to offer a more quality service for a fair price. So maybe we could start in this debate on how we shape the future more sustainable for our travel and tourism industry. If Willie Walsh, would you like to tell us which are the trends you observe in the aviation sector and how the industry is preparing for this net zero carbon? Would you like to take the floor, please?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for the organizers for this event today. I think just start on a positive note that our industry, the airline industry, continues to recover. We are on the road to recovery. We're not there yet. There is still some distance to go. International travel is running at about 68% of where we were in 2019, but there's a big variation between different parts of the world. So if I look at the Middle East and North America, it's actually about 10% ahead of where it was in 2019. But international travel within Asia is only at 25% of where we were in 2019. Within Europe, international travel within Europe is at about almost 90% of where we were, so a strong recovery in Europe, which most of us have seen. But Europe to the Far East is still at around 35%. So we're still seeing parts of the world, even as you heard in the video there, that have not reopened fully and where restrictions are in place. So as our industry continues to recover, the real positive has been the ongoing commitment by airlines to achieve net zero in 2050. And I think when you consider that this is the deepest crisis the airline industry has ever seen, to have a significant commitment, which will cost trillions of dollars between now and 2050, to achieve net zero, I think demonstrates how committed our industry is to play its part in the global challenge to climate change. At the IATA AGM last year in Boston, the industry committed to net zero. We identified credible pathways to achieve that. The most significant contribution in the period between now and 2050 will come from sustainable aviation fuels. We heard earlier this morning about the investments in technology that will need to take place. But the real advantage of technological change is likely to be in the latter part of our journey to net zero, and indeed beyond that. So getting to true zero, I think, is going to take some time. But sustainable aviation fuel represents a credible opportunity to our industry to play its part. And the industry is absolutely committed. You heard Joseph Varadi saying that Wizz would be prepared to invest equity in more sustainable aviation fuels. So anybody who doubts the determination of the industry just needs to look at what has been happening. We used every single drop of sustainable aviation fuel that was available to the industry in 2021. Every single drop. We would have used more had it been available. The ongoing commitment to purchase sustainable aviation fuel is running now at about $20 billion US. So we have a commitment, we have determination, we have a credible path to achieving it. What we need, and I was pleased to hear Henrik say it this morning, we need the right incentives, and it is, I think, carrot rather than stick. We need incentives, and we need the right framework. We need politicians to ensure that we have the right policy frameworks in place to assist the industry in transitioning from where it is today to where it is we need to get to. So I think it's a very positive story. I think we should be confident that we will play our part and that we can get to net zero in 2050.
Thank you very much. We have with us Mrs. Monteiro, as member of the European Parliament, who can certainly later on perhaps reflect on the regulatory framework. But may I invite Peter Gerber, you are the CEO of Brussels Airlines. Which is your pathway and how you put concretely into practice this agenda, this commitment and this ambitious agenda that Willie Walsh mentioned, please?
Yeah, maybe let me just add to what Willie stated here. We are all committed to this goal, net zero. By 2050, this means it's a clear target and it's a clear scientific-based target. So meaning we have ideas, scientific-based ideas, how to achieve this. And for us, for Brussels Airlines being part of the Lufthansa group, we want to make sure that we already reduce our CO2 emissions by 50% till 2030. And we have a whole set of measures. First, already mentioned by Willie itself, sustainable aviation fuel. We are the biggest buyer of sustainable aviation fuel in Europe, the Lufthansa Group, and we will buy even more if it is possible. So, like he said, every drop we can get, we will get in order to make sure. But that's not the only part we do. The second part is, of course, technical innovation. With every new plane, we reduce the emissions by approximately 30%, so we try to get in as much new planes as possible to assure this. And the third point, which is also very important, is infrastructure. There's nothing we can work on alone, but it's clear that all infrastructure related to aviation also has to improve. The biggest one in Europe being the project we know since 20 years, Single European Skies. We have 20 ATCs, air traffic controls. We have 48 in Europe. In America, there's just one. Imagine just to put them together, it's only a question of political will. And then we reduce the emissions here in Europe, the CO2 emissions, by 10% with one finger snip. And it's something we can do. We don't need scientific approaches. We just need the political will to achieve this. And I think what's very important is that all leaders here of the European aviation industry, but moreover, is really emphasized also worldwide, but I can specifically more speak of Europe. We are really committed to these goals, and we are also committed to the plans of the EU Commission and the EU in total, the Fit for 55 proposal, because from our point of view, this shows clearly the way to bring this industry to a carbon neutral status till 2050. So it's the real transformation in a decarbonized industry, also decarbonized aviation industry. There's only one thing we have to make sure, and then Europe can serve as a role model there worldwide. We have to make sure that it's technically possible, and we have to make sure that it's from a competitive point of view neutral, because otherwise the European industry would perish, would vanish, and this is of course nothing which serves then as a role model for all other countries. So it's very clear, a very good way we support on. I think we all have a plan. The only thing we have to make sure is that it's feasible and that we ensure a level playing field for the whole industry. This is something we have to work on with all European institutions, but I'm pretty confident that we get there.
So, in your opinion, so it clearly in making sure that the regulatory framework ensures a level playing field and access to sustainable aviation fuels, but also you mentioned as a key accelerator the European Single Sky. What about you, Marie-Caroline, Laurent? You know, you are familiar, come from the aviation sector, but now you are here representing the maritime tourism, the cruise industry. What is in your agenda and what is going to enable the maritime tourism industry to embrace sustainability?
Thank you very much, Cristina. Thank you very much for inviting CLIA to share our views on our sustainable agenda, which is indeed our top priority. I joined CLIA last year, and the first thing I told to my members is that sustainability is not an option. It is your condition for future operation. Unlike my aviation colleagues, cruising belongs to the tourism sector, and as such is not essential. It is about entertainment, tourism activities, and discriminatory spending. So as such, we have to demonstrate leadership and ambition to achieve our net zero emission goal that our industry has also committed to by 2050. To do so, we have a comprehensive strategy. It is not just about carbon emission. We are a mode of transport, we are a ship, but we also are hotel activities, tourism in the destination. So with that in mind, we have a clear strategy that relies on 3 pillars. The first one is obviously to eliminate and reduce the emissions of our vessels. As such, I would like to break a bias, as our speaker this morning has mentioned. What are today the shipyards in Europe building? They're building cruise ships. 90% of the total value of the shipyard order book is made of cruise ship in Europe. You eliminate the cruise industry in Europe, you eliminate your shipyard activity and your maritime industry in the region. So breaking this bias about cruising or tourism not being essential, not being useful to the economy, and sometimes being just a nuisance, as you can hear in some destination, you have to think about the industrial value and actually the fact that from the cruise sector we are leading the Green Deal innovation in the maritime sector by building our ships that are also much more efficient, packed with new innovation that allows us to reduce today by at least 20 to 25% our emissions with each new ship that comes out, and in the future develop new technologies that can be applied to the overall maritime sector. So this is very clearly our contribution and our path. Today we have 78 new vessels on order. The industry is quite small, it's only 350 total globally. So with this innovation, which represents more than 47 billion euros invested directly in Europe, we are actually powering this innovation change that is needed for the decarbonization. Very quickly, as I mentioned, we have 3 angles of our strategy. The first one focusing on the technology innovation and the vessel. The second one is obviously looking at our hotel activities on board, which is also not only a source of energy needs, but also waste management. And with that, we are looking at deploying, and our vessels today already deploy best-in-class technologies compared to, and sometimes actually better than most of our cities where we stop in terms of waste management, recycling, and circular economy. The last part of our strategy and our goal is the destination management, and this is really where we need the partnership with the overall tourism sector. It's when we visit the beautiful destination where we go to, we want to make sure that we contribute to the sustainable tourism development of this destination, and how to do that together with the destination to the economic benefit of the population that we visit, but also making sure that we can grow together in the future without having a negative impact on the population and the environment. So this is our strategy with some regulatory elements in it, and as my colleague, we fully embrace the objectives of the Fit for 55 package in Europe. We completely adhere to the inclusion of the maritime sectors in the measures proposed by the European Union, which will help us having this regulatory clarity that we need for further investments.
Thank you very much, Marie-Caroline. So it's about making sure that there is a proper impact assessment, socio-cultural, socio-economic, but also environmental, guiding those holistic strategies that we need in partnership with destinations, and taking into account the needs of the industry into this net zero journey. But you all, the three of you mentioned the regulatory framework, so perhaps, dear Claudia, honourable member of the European Parliament, would you like to answer the question, how the European Parliament can ensure that the interests of the industry are taken into account in the Fit for 55 package?
Thank you, Cristina. Thank you for the invitation for being here in this interesting panel. This is what the European Parliament, at least in our political group and also in the Tourism Task Force, the group that we work and we discuss this particular issues regarding travel and tourism sector, we listen to the industry. And what it was said here, the problems, the views of the industry are very important for us when we are trying to write a balanced framework that can be a way to achieve the goals of the Fit for 55. We know that travel and tourism sector had a huge impact with this pandemic crisis and nowadays, because you mentioned the customer journey, and the customer journey is also regarding airports. And we are facing in several airports in Europe the chaos. So all of this needs to be better worked and have a good answer on this. When we were discussing and working on the refuel aviation, and having in mind also the small airports from the small regions, in the negotiation process, we underline that it's fundamental to have a book and claim system. Why? Because we know that for 2050, to achieve those goals, this intermediate period will be crucial to give to some airports, to some airlines, to small and medium enterprises, the time to adapt. And not only the time, but also the financial support, or at least to put the small and medium airports, enterprises, and all the small businesses that are connected to this area, to give them the same, at least the same level of access to funding and an alternative way to achieve these goals. Let's be realistic. We know that we need a sustainable aviation and also cruises. But for this, when we are discussing internally in Parliament, we know that this aviation with sustainable fuel will need to come from various sources and with different technological solutions, including biofuels. This is the discussion, and this is why we want also to support this, because to increasingly support the targets that are coming, like the synthetic ones, when the industry is still so embryonic in these terms, the risk for the consequences, not only for the sector, but also for the customer, for people that are traveling, or for people's life, will be very huge. So we are working on several points on this, and the same goes to the same truth comes to the tourism ecosystem. Massive lack of human resources, the need of solid investments to face this climate transition process. That's why I want also to share that it's good that the European Commission last year launched a 10 million euros, created a line with 10 million euros. It's an assumption of this need that the European Parliament is asking for several years. It's a small amount, it's true, but it's a way. It's also important to simplify the access of the existing financing, mainly to the micro, small and medium enterprises. Why? Because they are more scarce in resources and this access to the financing is more limited. We presented also in the Parliament a project pilot to create a platform that can help or that can support application for funds. We think that this is very important when regarding the tourism ecosystem, because small and medium enterprises with the scarcity of resources need to have this help. So I think to finish also that for sustainable tourism, if we want to have this complete idea of sustainable tourism, financing is important. The framework, it's important from the side of politicians and the European Parliament, but we should not forget the importance of qualified workforce. And it's why we also proposed a creation of a European Tourism Academy, where at the tourism European level, this training of the workforce, we think it's essential. And this will be one of the needs of the sector that we need to support, to create added value, and also this will for sure result on better wages and to a more attractiveness of the industry. So these are the goals. The Fit for 55 is very, very ambitious. We know that we need to go through this ambition, but we need to have a special attention to small regions, to small enterprises, to small airlines, to small airports, to give them the temporary space and the financial support to make this transition beside and along with these goals.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Monteiro, indeed, in Europe, 90% of the tourism value chain is made by SMEs, so it's important that we all have proper access to this in funding. But you, gentlemen, and also Marie-Caroline, you mentioned the importance of investment in technology, and this technology will take time. If I understood correctly, the first aircraft fully sustainable will not come before 2035. So do you see Willie Walsh or Peter Gerber in your industry? Do you see already some projects, some investments going into that direction, or Marie-Caroline, some partnerships, public-private partnerships enabling to accelerate these investments into this technology?
Yeah, without question, we have to be confident that technological solutions will be presented to us. It is, however, important to have, as I said earlier, a credible pathway to achieving net zero. So to try and convince people that we can get there based on something that may happen in the future, I don't think would be credible. Hence the reason we put so much emphasis on sustainable aviation fuels and the right policy framework around that. But we will see hydrogen playing a big part. The challenge with hydrogen, of course, is it needs to be green hydrogen. And we're a long way away from having sustainable green hydrogen available at volume to enable us to make that transition. But it will be part of the transition, probably in the latter period between 2035 and 2050. But going back to what Peter said, when we talk about technological advances, we have a lot of technology in place today that isn't being used. Single European sky does not require a single euro of investment because airlines have already invested in the technology to enable us to fly. And it's important to understand why we as an industry keep repeating this. It's estimated that, on average, every flight in Europe is 50 kilometers longer than it should be. So we're flying 50 kilometers for every flight. There was 11.1 million flights in European airspace in 2019. 550 million kilometers flown that was not needed because of a lack of political will to address the introduction of the single European sky. The technology exists, so we don't have to dream about something that is going to be provided to us. It is here, it's in place today. We just need political will to push forward with the single European sky. So technology has already provided us with some of the solutions. It will continue to provide us with more solutions as we get on this exciting journey to net zero in 2050.
Maybe very briefly, just let me add on this, because you directly asked after investments. I think the biggest investment programs in the whole transport industry always run the airlines. Of course, also cruise ships are very big investments, but there are not so many. But every airplane, a normal airplane you fly, when you came here today to Brussels, Airbus or Boeing, costs a small one, around 30 million euros. The bigger ones, when you fly to the US or so, it's around 130 to 150 million euro, one plane. And you see we have an awful lot of planes, and then you can imagine how big the investments are. Again, it's worth it because every new plane is 30%, around 30% more efficient than the last generation of planes, because it's such a young technology that we are able to have those movements. But again, this needs a lot of money, and it's also something we really need to talk about. If we want to get things faster done and better done, we need to really think about where to get the money from. And when you impose taxes on the transport sector, this means this money lacks for investments. So it may be a better idea to take this money you deduct from the transport industry to really invest it in those programs, in new planes, in new infrastructure, in sustainable aviation fuel. I think then we can be not only better off, but we can achieve our goals even faster.
So it's about smart investments and that are going to make the difference, but also a fair taxation policy, so reinvesting what we collect. Is it about compensation, the solution in the meantime, do you think? Or maybe, Marie-Caroline, you wanted to tackle the perspective of the partnerships or the regulatory framework on Fit for 55?
So the maritime sector maybe starts with a bit of delay compared to the aviation discussion which we have been having in Europe for the last at least 10, 15 years. The beauty of my sector is that it floats, so it has less, not the same challenges in terms of the physics, and there are many solutions already today implemented in the different new vessels that we put out that can contribute to a significant reduction of our emissions. The complexity of our sector is that it is very diverse. So there's a big discussion in the European Parliament and some hype around ammonia. Ammonia is highly toxic. You don't put ammonia on a 3,000 passenger ship. So having this focus on specific type of fuel or specific solution is somehow counterproductive. We need a technology neutral approach set by the regulation, but with clear criteria and clear incentives. One thing I will say is that today, and I hear you speak about book and claim, the quotas for suppliers under the red, this is nothing we have for the maritime sector at the moment. So there is a big gap for us on the regulatory side in Europe with the Fit for 55 package, which is making sure you have a level playing field in terms of benefits, incentives for investments in new technology, but more importantly, as Willie was saying, this is also one of our key pillars for decarbonization with a sustainable marine fuel and not aviation fuel. Today, there is barely no sustainable marine fuel in terms of production, and the whole effort is diverted to either road or aviation, since we have had incentives for aviation for several years now. So this is a very important point for us in terms of treating the different sectors in a fair way, having similar incentives to make sure that you can have access to the sustainable fuel that we need and to the technology investment that we also need as well.
It's about investment. There are around 723 billion in the recovery and resilience plans in Europe right now, where there is a specific envelope about recharge and refuel, which is precisely to help these investments in sustainable transport. So there is also a big envelope on environment and climate change of around 25 billion in Europe. So one wonders how we make sure that we channel these investments into the needs our sector has. Would you like to comment on this? In terms of which kind of projects will make the difference if we would be in a recovery plan? What would be your wish for these investments?
So for us, obviously, in the very immediate action is the connection to shoreside electricity at ports. This allows us to basically eliminate all of our emission when we are at ports. So this is why we are also very closely watching the discussion on AFIR to make sure that there is no discrimination in terms of which vessels has access to the shoreside electricity at ports. Cruise ship, the value of connecting to the shoreside electricity could eliminate at least 10% of our emission. So this is an immediate thing that you can do today. Today, 35% of our vessels are equipped with the capacity to connect. Within the next 5 years, we will be at around 75%. So we are ready in terms of the vessels' equipment. We have invested the money already. We need the infrastructure. So this is the type of partnership that we need to make sure that we have a clear signal that there is no discrimination in terms of access to the infrastructure and that the investment is made and that the commitment from the port, the airport, but also the member states is here to facilitate that transition.
Yes, Claudia, please.
Just, Cristina, let me add that this is the big discussion also in the European Parliament. And I mentioned refuel aviation because it's of course, we were in the panel, but the 455, it's a branch of several legislative, as you mentioned, RED, AFIR. This is all connected, and we need to find a balanced framework where the financial support can fit each one and can give the way that they can do, that the industry can do this transition. I know that's important, we need to do it right away, but we need to do it with the right support to every sector. And as it was said by Laurent, the cruise ship is very different, and we are also working on ports infrastructures because we need to see how will the support to the cruise ships could be put it in place. So in ports, what kind of infrastructures? And this is a huge discussion, seeing also that we have a real different understanding ideologically. You understand that from the green side, the political groups want to push and push, and we are trying to make them understand that yes, the road is over there, but we need to tackle each segment of the industry, travel and tourism, and to see how this framework can be balanced for each segment and each industry. This is the discussion, but just to say it from our side and from the EPP group that which I represent, we are very even split inside, but we are very committed to understand the industry and to help the industry to make this transition. The goal is huge in 2050, but at least these years of transition to be done in a cautious way, or at least with good thoughts on that.
Yes, I see you, Willie. We're just taking the microphone. Would you like to share our final message? We hear this morning, no Green Deal without technology. Could we say no Green Deal or no global 2050 agenda without travel and tourism?
I think that is a very important point. You know, when we look at the contribution to GDP, when we look at the contribution to jobs in Europe, all of these issues are going to be critical in the years ahead. So technology is very important to us. The right policy framework, absolutely critical. You know, low-hanging fruit that's available there, let's go after it. You know, let's ensure that we provide a framework that is incentivizing people to get to net zero in 2050, rather than punishing people as they make that journey. And you know, my big concern is that too many people want to address this issue through, as Peter said, taxation, using a big stick. You don't need to force the industry to decarbonize. The industry wants to decarbonize. What you need is to assist the industry in achieving that target. We're ready to do it, we're able to do it, and absolutely determined to do it. You know, but the right policy framework is important. Using all the technological advances that we have available to us is important. And we've got to recognize that sustainable aviation fuels, for example, represents a real win-win. It will create sustainable jobs. It will lower the dependence on imported energy, and it will provide a very credible path to decarbonizing the airline industry and indeed the cruise industry as well.
Yes, you mentioned an important subject. We don't have time, unfortunately, but what would be the sustainable jobs of the future? What is the talent that's in the industry you need to enable this transition? But first, your final message, Peter.
To your question, I'm totally convinced that we will reach our goals by 2050. It's the right goals, as Willie stated again. Decarbonization is what we absolutely want, and I'm totally convinced that with the technology we see and with the plans we have, we really can achieve it. So it's the right way forward. But, and this is the third thing, we really need a smart regulation which shows the feasible things, gives us the opportunity to really concentrate on the right things and makes sure that we have a competitive, neutral environment. With these three things, I'm totally convinced we will make it.
Thank you very much. Marie-Caroline, your final message.
Thank you very much. For me, the key message and urgency at the moment is making sure that there is clear commitment from all partners to achieve together the sustainable goal without discrimination. And I am looking at the winter ahead of us with energy shortage and economic difficulties. And as a tourism sector, I really wish we avoid the same mistakes we have seen with COVID, with discrimination between what is essential, non-essential, and a kind of black and white approach. So making sure that tourism is contributing to the economy, is recognized as such, can benefit from the adequate support, is taken into account when we discuss sustainable policies, support mechanism, incentives to reach the goal, and not considered as kind of a side activity compared to the other industry. This is really my main concern at the moment, that we see too much of this discriminatory approach between what is essential and not, and against what criteria, and really wish to have that neutral approach that considers the actual efforts and reduction that can be achieved for all the sectors, including tourism.
So travel and tourism to be in the plan, to be in the budget. Claudia, your final message?
Final message. I think it's not new to say that the ecosystem represents 10% of the GDP. So I think this is a good number to, from this political side, to remember also to the European Commission the need that we ask to the Commission to give to this all ecosystem. So we will try to, and representing also the SMEs, being vice president of the SMEs, of course, that I just wanted to understand that this balance of this framework, of regulatory framework that we want to prepare goes aligned with the objectives of Fit for 55, but once again, looking at each segment, at each sector that represents the whole ecosystem to give the special support, and not only by taxations, of course, I'm apologist of that, but this needs to be a balanced framework with a balanced way to achieve these huge goals. We hope that from the political side, not only from the Parliament, but also from the Commission, this courage can be representative of all the resilience of this sector.
Because you mentioned resilience, is it also that we need this, we could conclude by Arwin, that we have these long-term goals, we have credible pathways, now we live in a constant changing environment, so resilience would be that we have in place the partnerships and the mechanism that would allow us to adapt in the meantime as we follow our pathway. That would be our wrap-up for today. We certainly need more dialogue in this subject. I thank you very much for your inspiring contributions. I hope it was interesting and useful in this global forum tourism of today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Cristina, Núñez and the panelists, the Honourable Member MEP Claudia Monteiro de Aguiar, Peter Gerber, Marie-Caroline Laurent and Willie Walsh. Thank you to all of them. Sustainability is not an option, we heard there. The industry wants to decarbonise, it doesn't need convincing.